Ken Burns is a great documentary filmmaker. I don't know how I'm going to make this segue, but I'm going
I
to
put
do
you
my
in a really
damn. I
bad
know you
spot
did.
there again.
I know you did. But he did Vietnam War. He did the history of baseball. He did the Civil War, and he has a new documentary that premieres. It's September 19th through the 22nd on PBS, and it's a 4-part film by Ken Burns, his oldest daughter Sarah, and her husband David McMahon. And Ken Burns, kind enough to join us on the program. When did Muhammad Ali become a hero?
I think he was a hero almost from the beginning. That kind of pan world heroism happens towards the end as we let go of the memories of some of the divisive aspects. But he's at the beginning, he's saying, I'm pretty as a girl, I'm black, I'm beautiful. He is providing many people in this country with phrases and purchase for ideas that they didn't have. We made a film on Jackie Robinson. He redefined black manhood, black masculinity. Muhammad Ali came along and redefined it in a different way. Athletes weren't supposed to speak that way. They weren't supposed to brag. And certainly black athletes weren't supposed to do that. And he did it anyway. And just brought him into so many people's hearts if he turned off some other people. And then he joins a separatist religious sect, which turns off another group of people. And then strike three, he refuses to induction into the United States Army. And so we think of him as divisive. He's also quite provocative about how he treats his opponents. Joe Frazier, for example, Todd Boyd, the scholar, says in our film, he uses the language that a white racist would use about a black man to describe his opponent, two black men. And it's inexcusable. And yet emerging out of it is a person always with a sort of a joie de vivre, a kind of great sense of humor, a sense of natural promoting in a very American sense, and a kind of beauty. I mean, he's the greatest athlete of the 20th century, maybe of all time. He's won the championship 3 times, even though he lost 3.5 years at the height of his power because of his religious beliefs. This is a black man saying, I won't fight in the Vietnam War for religious reasons. An American can only hear black man doesn't want to go. He's giving us the middle finger. This is a political gesture. So even though the prosecutors are suggesting a more lenient sentence, the judge sends him to the maximum, 5 years. And when he's exonerated, he begins a comeback. He begins a climb that begins with some wins, but most significantly in the fight of the century in 71 against Joe Frazier, a loss, which he takes very well. He's behind on points. He goes out in the last round. He's knocked down. He gets back up again. He's very soft-spoken and speaks about the larger sense of being a role model, even in loss. And from then on, it's just Robert Lipsyte in our film says, Joe Frazier won the fight, but Muhammad Ali won America. And I think from that moment on, it just goes exponentially. So that when he dies, not too long ago, as you know, 2016, he dies the most beloved person on the planet, which has got to tell you something.
I couldn't help but notice this, Ken, when I'm watching this, that it's almost like he was able to listen to what people say about you after you die. Because once Muhammad Ali, like he was awake for his funeral. Because
yes, he was.
People were comfortable talking about Ali as if he was passed because he couldn't speak. Yeah. And it just dawned on me that what that must have been like for Ali to listen. I mean, he probably loved it because
they were still talking.
Yeah, they were saying all these nice things. I was also curious about his ring bravado, and it brought about images of maybe wrestling. Like wrestlers were over the top and gregarious. And I wondered, because we didn't have that. Boxers weren't like that. Athletes weren't like that. Like, where did that come from?
Well, David Remnick, the writer and early biographer of Cassius Clay, Muhammad Ali, also talked about one of the great inspirational moments. He's in Las Vegas for a fight, but he goes and he sees Gorgeous George, who was the villain in wrestling, who permed up his hair and was preening and whatever, and wearing this outlandish stuff and kind of androgynous at times. And And he understood that it didn't matter. People paid to see him and paid to hate him. And that's what he said, boo, hiss, throw peanuts, but whatever you do, pay to get in. And I think he understood a fundamental aspect of American hype, of P.T. Barnummism, is it didn't really matter, and that he could still be provocative. May I just admit, as I should have at the start, this is a film directed by my daughter, Sarah Burns, and David McMahon, her husband. We've been collaborating together on a lot of things, as well as me. But it's also to acknowledge there are lots of documentaries on Muhammad Ali, and there are several really good documentaries on Muhammad Ali, really, really good. And we don't mean to suggest that they are not. We wanted to do something comprehensive, from birth and boyhood in segregated Jim Crow Louisville to death by Parkinson's in 2016, and not just follow the fights and not just pay lip service to the Nation of Islam, but understand him as being a human being on a very legitimate and genuine spiritual quest, and also the personal stuff and the family and the biography and the wives and the children. And so this is as, I think, as comprehensive as you can get in terms of the arc of the life of one of the most extraordinary Americans who's ever lived.
It's a 4-part film by Ken and his daughter and her husband, and it premieres September 19th through the 22nd on PBS. How do you find the sweet spot for a documentary?
You would presume that this is an additive process, like you're building a house. It's subtractive, Dan. We collect, this is 8 hours long. We've got 400 or 500 hours of material, right? And then you're distilling it, to use a Louisville, Kentucky term. You're distilling it down to a kind of essence. And so our cutting room floor is not filled with bad stuff. It's filled with really, really good stuff that you look at and go, Burns, you've lost your mind. Why isn't that in there? And you go, well, it was there for 6 months, but it seemed to destabilize that. So our process is always being open. It's not a set research period followed by a writing period that produces a script that informs the shooting and editing, boom, done. We never stop researching. And we found stuff no one has ever put forward before, because we were with PBS. We spent 7 years. No suit is saying, I need this by the summer.
How often do people stop you on the street and say, I got a great idea for a documentary?
Every day.
What's the strangest suggestion?
Well, what one person wanted to be, they said, here, I'm giving you, they mailed this in, I'm giving you the 4 volumes of my grandfather's memoir of his Civil War years. Although I'd done the Civil War, turns out he never left Maine, but they, self-published this memoir.
Okay.
So I finally, after about 10 years, I did it up. The number one thing is railroads. The number 2 thing is labor. The next thing is education. And then they're just, you got to do this, and they're all right. And I'm working on 7 films right now because I am 68 years old. And I know if I were given 1,000 years to live, which I will not, I would not run out of topics in American history. And so I've got 4 different producing teams. Sarah and Dave are one of them. And we're just working on as many as we can in different stages of undress. And because I'm greedy for that experience of finding the sweet spot. I mean, I want to put my head on the pillow at the end of the day and say, God, I made at least one of them better.
Give me the sports documentary that hasn't been done but should be.
That's a really good question. I've tried in baseball. I did an update, the 10th inning. I promised people that if the Cubs won the World Series, I would do an 11th inning. And I am
You thought you were safe, Ken.
Thought I was so safe. George Will said, well, they're having a bad century. And it turned out that's all it was a bad century and a decade. So I've got to do that at some point. There's a lot of nice new stuff about it, but I got to just find the bandwidth to do that. I love baseball. It's the greatest sport ever invented. I love football a lot. And I'd like to see something done, I guess, in football that isn't just, the dramas of the reality TV nature of the behind the scenes. I don't know what that is right now, but nothing compares to baseball. And it's funny, I'm not a boxing fan. I made 2 boxing films. They total, 12 hours of time. On Jack Johnson 4 and on this one 8. But it's only because these 2 men were so transcendent. I mean, a lot of the sports writers who I've done lots of interviews with, and we've got 3 of the very best writer, Libsite, Dave Kindred, and Jerry Eisenberg in the film, who were Cubs growing up with Muhammad Ali and love him and care about him and remember each bad punch. But I would ask each one and no one's answered. I said, who's the heavyweight champion right now? It doesn't matter. After Muhammad Ali, you got a little dribble of Mike Tyson. And then, you know what? It does not matter until somebody else like him comes along, and hate to give away the plot. No one like Muhammad Ali is ever coming along again.
Do you need coffee or a nap?
I don't drink coffee because it's no problem getting me out of bed. What I need is, the conk on the head at the end of the day, because, it just to shut the thing up.
Thank you, Ken. Well done, as always.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
That's Ken Burns, Muhammad Ali, 4-part film with Ken, his oldest daughter, and her husband, premieres Sunday, September 19th through the 22nd on PBS.